Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Let's see, I don't think we had March minutes, did we? I couldn't find them on my emails.
I think I always send them pretty early to Jan. I guess they just weren't.
They didn't come out, okay. So we'll have to do that next month. So Jan, you guys know that Jan, good morning. Jan is on the road. So what we have is just a quick update on, I figured you might fill us in on the dates of the SEDS meetings if
yep.
they have them.
Yeah, we're, the distribution for the SEDS, solicitation for proposals went out. We're asking that they come back, I believe it's by May 18th, I think it is, on that.
That's McCann asking?
Yeah,
Yep.
and that the week of May 23rd, the committee will meet.
Okay.
And ask for people to come in and talk about the SEDS proposals. What we're doing is, Waldeboro's putting in 4, and the way we're running it this time is that everyone will speak at the same time, at the same meeting, so everyone can hear what's being proposed, and members of the committee are, welcome to come. It'll probably last about 2 to 3 hours. What is SEDS?
Yeah.
SEDS is a comprehensive economic development strategy. It's a venue where projects get on this list, and then once they're on the list, they're eligible for funding from the Department of Commerce, Economic Development
These are
Administration.
big, usually big, big projects, infrastructure things, where we're looking for millions of dollars from the,
The money goes to, it has to be to public infrastructure that supports an economic development project or company or something like
Right.
that. So, and the way it works is, projects come from the municipalities up, and with EDA, it's a 50% match. So it takes time for these projects to come to fruition, towns to develop the match resources. So the approach we've taken is that we'll accept projects in the infancy and the development stage, and then work with the towns over the, time to get them ripe enough to get an application in. So we put together 4, all of which are planning kind of, initial stages. So that will get them in the list, and then we can work on them on our leisure over the next year or so.
it's not frequently do some of these, it's not money that goes often out, so it's very competitive, and, so it's not something to count on, but it's
Yeah.
something to get in the pipeline.
The other strategy we're using is that when we bring all the projects together, we're, in a sense, sequencing them or sorting them, just to quote George, in a way that puts things that are aligned together or similar, so that we can make an attractive presentation to the DA, saying that, why just do one project when we have 2 or others that relate, get them all done. If they're tourist-based or marine-based or, something like that, where there's some connection to they interconnect through the region. So, and we haven't been able to get that cluster pulled together yet, but it's an idea that's intrigued EDA, so we hope this, bears some fruition on that. We have 2 projects that are recently funded, actually 3. There were 2 over the last, well, actually 4. Darling Center was funded to expand their complex in South Bristol. There were 2 at the Brunswick Naval, the former Naval Station, and there's an application that just went in for the Rockland Fish Pier. So there's a lot of activity, right now in our
good.
region, and 2 of them with Darling and the Fish Pier connect, very well, so.
Yeah, I had a question about that.
Sure.
That point. How do they connect, those?
Well, the last 2, both are marine-based,
Right.
Marine-based industries promoting.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a little background. When a SEDS project gets presented, the regional person it's kind of a competitive, internally they review them, and the person from the region has to present and they're competing for money over the entire country. So when when we're proposing, a cluster that have to do with a similar thing, it makes for a stronger case. That there's a lot of activity in that particular area, in this region. And quite honestly, these marine projects are a favorite of EDA, along with funding educational facilities and workforce development. So that's like a sweet spot. And of course, they always fund, infrastructure is something they've always done. But we try to look for projects that will, attract their
Be
interest.
competitive.
So it isn't geographically connected, so.
No, not, the only geographic connection is that it's the region that we're looking at.
region.
So when we
Because-
describe the economy,
Right.
we're describing the economy.
Okay,
of
so
the
they look
region.
at this on an economic view rather than a geographical view.
That's right, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, sir.
Just two quick follow-ups, related, I think. One is, are we really small potatoes in this competition compared to, for example, even semi-cooperative things like the Darling and the Rockland? And second, and maybe related.
Yeah.
In terms of community development grants, the kinds of things the CEI has been doing for a
Yeah.
long, long time. How is, which, if not both, should we be focusing on more, given our size and scale, and somehow not quite being as interwoven with some of the larger players?
No, all of EDA is small potatoes. I mean, all
Well, compared to
EDA
the Darling Center, I mean.
No, well, I'll give you an example. I say small potatoes because the typical grant is for about $1 million, and that's pretty straightforward. Uniform. Some projects get upward to close to 2 million, but most are in the $1 million range. So, and it comes up from the local municipal level. That's the way it's driven. So actually, Waldoboro is just as competitive as any other, yeah. It's a good source.
Do you get leverage? Good morning. Do you get leverage in these things or
That's another.
gain position if you're working with like MTI at the same time or?
Well, I guess I can answer that in this way. Since you need to match it by 50%, you need to bring in other financial sources.
So
And this where-
you can match it without ever reaching into your pocket?
Absolutely, yeah. So you can bring in funds from CEI, CDBG, the businesses themselves, because the town can put some money in. I mean, we use Northern Border grants if we're only eligible in Knox County for that, not Lincoln County. The Community Development Block Grant, Northern Border, CDBG, MDOT. Local businesses can put in something. The towns always put in something, there's some component.
To kind of interconnect this back to me flogging the concept of sequencing.
Yeah.
Aquaculture, land-based aquaculture and shoreside seem to be getting a lot of status. We're working with people
Yeah.
who are, well, one of them wants to grow eels, so.
Oh, yeah.
So the sequencing side of this thing, for me, is we need to, I don't know what comes first. Do you find places for young families to live, or do you find jobs for them? Which comes, I think you have to have the places for them to live before you have a job from the to park the car at. But we don't have enough of either. And so if,
Yeah.
for example, the road that we imagine going out toward the high school, that would be places to live.
Yeah.
So, which would be one of the bigger numbers on here probably. So we do climb up into serious projects.
I think that this is pieces of a puzzle. The EDA, is solely on economic and job creation, commercial activity. Won't do anything with housing at all. So that's one component we go after. The housing, we're gonna have to look at from a different angle.
But can they be somehow
Push together somehow.
dovetailed or matched or coordinated? Because, I mean,
As a project.
buttons are no good without buttonholes.
Yeah.
Not for.
Well, for example, with the sewer expansion running
Yeah.
east,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a perfect example of, I think, a SEDS.
Well, no,
It
the
has to be
SEDS,
TIF?
the infrastructure for the SEDS has to have it has to be
Direct
heavily
jobs.
direct to jobs
Yeah.
and
Okay.
economic. Now, it could,
Chickens
if
and
it
eggs,
goes
buttons,
by
buttonholes.
housing development, fine.
Yeah.
But the real focus, you're gonna sell it to them on the job. So,
So where do we go for that critical piece? Some of those pieces to stitch the sequence together?
For one thing,
Sewer.
we do have.
sure,
We have some developments that were started before the crash
Well-
that never sold.
one of the things we're gonna talk about later is just TIFs, and that might
Right.
help
Okay.
fill
Yeah.
in some of that. But most of the time, if it's non-commercial or economic development related for sewer expansion, it's on the municipal dime. But we have sources for, particularly USDA, is a common source. But it's, we're gonna have to, and then package as much as we possibly can. Like USDA will offer usually a mix of a small portion of a grant and the rest would be a loan. And typically they're 90-10, 90 loan, 10 grant, or 80-20 on that, so
Is that USDA?
Are they at commercial rates or,
slightly below.
yeah?
Like, they're competitive, but the nice thing about it is that their process is fairly straightforward. They're easy to deal with. They know how to deal with these projects. But in today's environment, some of the bond rates that you're gonna get out there may be much more competitive on that. And it's really the municipal's choice on that. But USDA has always been a source for small, systems, Norwalk, Thomaston, things like that, Warren, places that can't go.
Rural development money?
Yes, rural development money, yeah. But, good, I'm
I
sorry.
was just gonna throw in the last comment, just for general consumption and consideration. I think now, is maybe an important time, now in the next year or two. Interest rates, including bond rates, they're gonna go up. And if the town decides to do something significant in long-term funding for a TIF project or something like that, now is really the time to get our ducks in order. Because 3 years, 4 years down the road, we're gonna be back up at 6 and 8%, which is twice the rate of today. Huge money we're talking about over the next 20 years.
So
anyway.
that begs the next question. When you get involved in one of these initiatives, how long does the cycle time typically take from the time you start aiming at a opportunity till they get awarded? Is it
Oh,
3,
for a
4
SAGE
years?
project? Well, it depends on two things. One is your ability to pull the project together in terms of it being relatively shovel-ready, engineering, things like that. And the second is, and this is critical for EDA, is you have to have the match amount. The way they do the applications is you submit a pre-application, which is fairly simple, maybe 10 pages. They look at it, and that's their chance to work with you to refine your application. They usually give you an answer in 30 days, whether it's a go or no-go. And then you have 30 days after the acceptance of the pre-app to actually submit the formal application, at which time you have to have the match committed. So not just theoretically, you have to have a commitment from somebody, whether the town's gonna bond, you need the approval for the bond from the town, a board of selectmen, or the match money from CDBG or whatever in hand. So the timing, John, is critical, and that could that's the problem with these
Yeah,
projects.
that looks
is-
like the challenge.
Well, yeah, it took, like Rockport with the fish pier, that's been going on for quite some time. and
Rockport or
it-
Rockland?
Rockland, excuse me. Thanks, Max. And it took like 2 years, 2.5 years to gel the match money all together at that time. So that's usually what takes time.
Yeah, to get the match money figured out first, so you almost have to have a pledge of some kind, I assume.
Well, EDA will come out and say we'll take a project like a sewer project in town, just for sake of argument. Once we get our ducks in order in terms of, we kind of know where it's gonna go, we have some things fleshed out, we have something that we can say, we can, talk about job creation of this project, we'll get EDA to come in and talk to us and visit the site and kind of have a conversation. And that's the point where, this is a fluid process, you get them involved, on that. They say, geez, this is great, but you need to do this, this, and this. So we get them, it moves along, and you get to a point where, they can't say, yes, we're gonna fund you, but you get to a point where, they can say, you meet our objectives, and, yeah, we're interested in your application.
Right.
So ideally, if you put in a good application and they have the money, it'll get funded. And of course, you have the match.
How much, if any, of the match can be in kind from a municipality?
That's another good question. In-kind is tricky because you're dealing with the federal government. And I say it's tricky is that they want, if you're gonna say in-kind labor, boy, we have to document everything. I mean, really, it's better to think of in-kind in terms of cash. with dealing with this source.
Okay.
It's just, you can do it the other way, but to be honest with you, you're gonna have to hire somebody full-time to document every minute somebody spends providing. It's just not worth that effort to do it on that. You know, again, you know, and that's the other switch to this is, you know, there's an administrative cost, usually $25,000 to $30,000 per grant, just to administer their paperwork. But, you know, if you're getting $1 million.
It comes out in grant.
Oh, yeah.
So are you able to express to us your successes in this world of?
Well, we just did. I mean, we have 3 already funded and 1 that's going in.
And you were involved in that?
That's the purpose of our district, is primarily to act as the economic development arm of EDA for this particular area.
So you're the architect of putting together the strategy and how it went through and so.
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody understood that here,
Yeah.
because that's very,
That's key.
Yeah, we're kind of like, we push the pieces together.
Those 4 are of how many? How big is the pool in the last year or 2 that you're working on? Roughly, 100?
No, it's about $4 or $5 million.
No, he meant how many
No, how many
competitors.
projects? How many submissions?
competitors?
Yes.
Just from our.
In our region.
Just in, well,
Competing projects, you mean?
Yep.
yeah,
Yes,
from the north,
basically.
yeah, from the northeast, I don't have the
Don't know.
number offhand. I know we pushed together 4 that got funded. And the total in the mix is like 16, but not all 16 are ready to go to
In total,
application.
in our regional mix.
Yeah, there's 16 projects.
I'm just wondering how competitive and how successful we're being. What's the measuring metric?
Well,
4
there's-
out of some number.
I think, the way it works with EDA, if you meet their criteria,
They just do it?
and they have the funds, you're gonna get funded.
Cool.
You have to meet the, you know.
But what we mean is how many projects have been funded in our region over the years?
Oh, all right. I can give you an exact number. I'm gonna ballpark it.
Yep.
Within the last like 10 years, there's been, I'd say 8 or 9 on that there.
So 1 a year.
Yeah, but they haven't come like that.
No.
The cluster. Yeah,
So this isn't like landing on the moon, this is
Yeah.
a project you can undertake and have.
The Brunswick Native, and, the project there got like 4 of them. West Bath got a business park.
There was who's the Marine Center out on Booth Bay, what's the name?
Yeah, that's Darling.
No, Booth Bay. Darling's Bristol.
Oh, Darling's Bristol. Oh, I know who, yeah,
You guys know.
yeah.
So it sounds like the onus is on us.
Oh,
If we
absolutely.
can drive this
Yeah,
thing, we can
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
The money's there, and they're willing to give it to us.
Yeah, it's just, again, I always tell towns that the trick is getting the match together. That, and, the EDA application is, for the projects we kind of identify, we can attribute jobs to all of them, except for the sewer expansion over to the high school. That, that's an unknown yet, if that's right for EDA, because we haven't, but the others we could probably pull, we can find job creation for that. And they would meet an economic, they're gonna benefit businesses and et cetera, and we just need to get match money
Do,
attributed to that.
do people ever, I guess I'd say, formalize the analysis that to get employees, you need homes for them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. George, yes, yeah. But it's,
So that could be part of an analysis if
oh,
you.
yeah, but we're gonna have to look for other, when we talk about the TIF, there is a component, the TIF has there's 3 possibilities, there's just a general commercial TIF.
Yeah.
There's a downtown TIF, and then there's one for housing. So there's 3, just with that kind of money. But there's other sources that we could hopefully employ for affordable housing. That's a tough nut to crack, though, to be honest with you.
Do they ever fund educational programs like at a school system, high school?
EDA will if they're economic related or workforce training. So they will do, Max and I have had conversations about this, let's say you have a community college and EDA won't fund the construction of the community college, but they will fund the workforce training component of it. So if you're gonna train plumbers, electricians, et cetera, EDA will fund that as long as you have the money dedicated just towards that purpose on that.
So following up on that idea, if Region 8 is just invested
Yes.
$25 million, $23 million in their new school.
Yeah.
We're talking about several new programs, really
Yeah.
exciting. One of them is aquaculture, actually. It just in sort of a generic sense, where
Yeah.
we've decided, the board has decided to proceed with creating, through the state application process, 2 new tracks. One is outdoor leadership, you probably read about in the paper recently, and the other is aquaculture. Can EDA help with that? That's extremely jobs focused and job
That's a
centric.
possibility. That would have to probably come from Rockland, the application, because the school is in Rockland physically, right?
But it's a regional school.
I know, but that's where the source of, we'd have to work with.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, Rockland, we have to have a,
How
we have
would
to
we
pin it.
investigate that a little more, just probe around that, talk with you?
Yeah, we can talk to us on that there. Again, we have to make a direct connection. With a project like that, it's easier when you're dealing with the post-secondary level or training of existing employees. But when you're dealing with high school, and that, we have to make a direct connection that this is a, like what we used to call them, trade school kind of connection. That the person's gonna graduate and earn a certificate, and that's gonna get him a path to a job. So that is something we'd have to talk to. It has a potential.
Under the heading of networking, I can never remember the name of it, but there's a small organization on the tip of Port Clyde, right next to the lighthouse, really. I can't think of the name of it, but it's doing aquaculture right there on the point. Do you remember the name of it?
No, it's a
Doing
small program.
aquaculture or training, or both?
It's training.
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 It's like hands-on.
Yeah.
It's titled something like, to teach yourself to run your own aquaculture business or.
Yeah, the name will come to me as soon as I'm not trying to think of it.
I'd love to hear it. Do you think it
4
just?
a.m.
Because there is a
Yeah.
demand for people to work. I mean, the aquaculture businesses that start can't find workers.
Right.
Yeah, and you have to be
Absolutely.
kind of you have to have a little bit of biology, a little bit of a carpenter, a little bit of a fisherman, I
Sort
mean,
of
it's.
systems approach.
Yeah,
We've got some people we're working with who are buying a sugar kelp, the one they make the beer out of. They're buying it off the coast of France, and they wonder if they could get it here.
absolutely. yeah.
Sure.
They're actually talking about freezing it and taking it to France to process,
Yeah.
because our reputation of clean water is worldwide.
There's a company in southern Maine that does that now. They freeze it. Yeah, they freeze it.
Yeah, they have some great kelp farms.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Down in the Casco Bay. Beautiful.
Interesting.
Okay, let's move to get an update from John on the CTC.
Yes, well, okay, the last time we met, we were still struggling to get an appointment formally put together for Julie and CTC to meet with Spectrum to discuss our franchise agreement and to further include details about the unserved pockets of this town that have no internet connectivity in the definitions the state has determined. And we now have a date for that meeting, which is the 25th, and Bob Butler is not here. Oh, he's
He
gone.
was here a second ago.
He had
He-
another Slovenia meeting.
Right, he and I are going to try and run that meeting to get some understanding going with Spectrum about upgrading the system in this town to cover these small areas. And they're typically less than a mile of distance from an existing cable that have 5 or 10 residents that are left out, and there's about 6 or 7 of them. Some are more attractive than others because there's less distance involved. And it's all about the take rate within that distance, how many potential customers there are. So we're going to have a formal discussion with that. And I've been encouraged by the state Connect Me Authority to have this discussion to try and get this going, because they're looking for new ways to fund grants that take care of filling in those who are left behind. That's the classic expression, eh? Those who are left behind. And that's exactly what's happened here in this town. We have most of the town already covered between Spectrum and LCI, except for these few. So that's the big thing that's going to happen. And we've been trying for a year to get this appointment. And so Julian is not going to be here because of a prior commitment, but we'll be able to get focus, I think, between the two of us to get this going.
Is it as black and white as there's a certain number of possible customers per feet, and if you negotiate the numbers, as a tough negotiator, you can require them to link to more people? I mean, is it as a matter of, okay, what are the two numbers, the number of residences and the number of miles, whatever it is? Is it as black and white as that?
Well, Spectrum has guidelines, or they have, I don't know if they're policies or guidelines, exactly.
But they're defined in the
Right,
supply
their
agreement?
magic number they want is 25 homes per mile,
Whoa.
which is impossible to meet in this kind of a setting, because they've already covered all of that. That's what I call they've already cherry-picked the town.
Now, is it true, and someone here must know, that we get money, the town gets money from Spectrum every
Yes.
something or other?
Yes?
So there seems like there's a perfect way to negotiate, like, okay, give us less money, but hook up more people. I mean,
Well,
that-
it's
that's
not
a-
a lot of money.
The problem is,
but,
we're
yeah.
talking hundreds of dollars,
Well-
not even thousands.
Well, no,
Okay.
actually,
thousand or something.
we get, and all the number that the state, the Spectrum gives the town roughly 25,000 a year back.
Okay,
And,
for that franchise agreement.
right. And then, so anyway, that's the amount of leverage we have to talk with them about in terms of negotiating a deal to get less, to get them to do more. Currently, when somebody tries to get their street that's unserved hooked up, there's no active way for them to get together with their neighbors and say, let's collectively discuss this. They give bids to people of what it'll cost them out of pocket to get each one
So
of
it's
those
up to,
spots.
it's up to the people on the street to
come
collect
together.
themselves together and say.
Well, to
let's
get
approach-
somebody has to organize them, because they haven't been able to do this in these places. I've talked to a number of these different locations, and they've never been able to really do this, because when you call into Spectrum, what happens is, you get sent to somebody out of the area, who then makes up a little work order, which then they send an field engineering kind of activity out to survey what it is you're trying to do, but they don't try and connect the dots well enough with the other unserved people in that area. And so it's always standalone, that what they come back with a number, and it's never adequate for the homeowner to want to spend the money to do that.
John?
And then the unfairness is, say they did have the money, as some people have done down in the coast here, to get the cable all the way to their home. Then they will start connecting up the other people along the way afterwards, but the individual that paid the price doesn't get a refund out of that at all.
If I understand right, under Time Warner, we were one of a few communities that had a number of 9 per mile or something like that. It was lower than the 25, for
okay.
example.
I wondered if it was a
Okay,
negotiable number.
to redefine what that is, the franchise agreement that we have that's been signed goes back 2 generations of ownership of the cable network. And at that time, it was 9 per. Now, at the very early discussions we've had over the telephone with the Spectrum representative, who is the VP of Government Affairs for New England, she told us that you don't have to worry about a franchise agreement because the one that's signed stands. And she said that, but not in concert with what we've just been talking about.
Yeah. Oh, they want to change the number.
And so we don't know. We have to sit and talk. I mean, this is a negotiation discussion about how we're gonna do
Historically, they
this.
have honored Time Warner had historically honored the 9 if you pushed them.
But they're no longer.
No, I know, I'm just
It was
answering
Delphia
George's
then,
question.
probably, yeah,
It was a
It
Delphia.
happened on Gross Neck, actually.
yeah.
And
So
it-
anyway,
no owner
excuse me,
put up-
but to just finish up my part of this, and then, so anyway, we're gonna start that discussion and see how it goes. And I think there's a way to drive this through, potentially, but it'll not happen until next year. And there are people that are screaming right now because they know that the town is mostly hooked up, and how come they got left out? And that's a valid question. In the meantime, they may have other ways to connect, such as their cell phone, using it as a bridge to the internet.
Hotspot.
Yeah.
And that's very expensive if you have everybody in the
is.
family trying to
Yeah.
use it.
Very expensive.
And so there's a lot of pressure. Anyway, I'm working on that. And it's, at the same time, we're getting ready to announce the LCI last grant. It's going to be called a Fiber 101 meeting with the people that are still not hooked up, yet they have the fiber running in front of their house, to explain what it is that LCI can offer them with fiber connectivity. And now, the last part of this discussion, and that's happening in the next few weeks too. The next thing that I need to tell you is that USDA has a rural utility fund, and they evidently there's $600 million that's being made available. The trouble is that's a federal fund, and the criteria for that money is not aligned with what the state of Maine is
Yeah, it's
doing.
different.
And what that means is the requirement, what they're gonna do is try and give funding to places that will only want to hook up 10 megabits per second down and 1 megabit
Ew.
up. And that's an asymmetrical, outdated spec. All of the federal specifications for interconnectivity today with the internet are all out of date. They all are asymmetrical. The FCC has another criteria for fully served, and it's 25 megs down and 5 up. Now, what's wrong with those asymmetrical specs I just said? One thing, today as the interface to the internet servers becomes simplified for the use, to help the public to use it, interactivity while you're in a session on your computer, it's like a remote terminal in the old days, where you're actually talking to that server back and forth all the time. And with these asymmetrical networks, they do not allow low latency connectivity. So if you're in one of those sessions on a server and you start typing, and you say, well, where's the word I just typed? Oh, here it comes.
Yeah.
I'm giving you that's really what it boils down to. And so I, for one, am one of the people in the state that's trying very desperately to make that piece of information be known, because the state is talking about realigning the state spec back to match the federal one. And that's because of DECD's initiatives without anyone technically oriented to understand why we
What
don't
that
want to do that.
Do
So
our elected officials, especially in Washington, think that to have a higher standard somehow is gonna cost the government more? Because they came up with this so long ago? I mean, what would?
You're right. You're
what would-
absolutely right.
Is that what would compel them to keep the numbers low? Thinking they're saving somebody money?
Well, what they have to understand is if we're gonna spend money at all, we ought to spend it on the
No,
technology.
I'm saying, where are we today? So today, the reason is this discrepancy is probably because someone doesn't know that the technology is there for the same cost for higher connectivity?
I think it's more politics than an understanding of the
Than
reality.
economics?
And it has to do with the Federal Communications Commission and and this was all decided 6 years ago, right? So, roughly speaking.
So that's a point cutting to a chase. So it's a
Yeah.
steep hill if you have to retrain Washington.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
Good luck.
way that's done is through Senator King and his staff, because they understand enough
Yeah,
about
and they-
this.
yeah, I'm not-
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is with USDA, this is not a problem just with this program, where there's difficulty is when people don't apply for it. And then they're willing to talk about updating the standard.
But-
And we've had that happen with other programs from them.
Right, so for an example, Fairpoint was given $50 million to connect up parts of Maine that are not connected with any form. So they put in this old antiquated DSL system that doesn't work that well and has known flaws in it with that money. And that's an example. And there are a lot of us that have been really involved in this quite a bit and have written back to the Connect Me Authority about this position, and there's gonna be a meeting at the end of May that I hope to attend where there's going to be a big discussion about this.
In my solar panels up here, I qualified for a REAP grant. REAP standing for, I guess, for Rural Electrification of America or something.
Yeah.
Which I probably was originally, or probably started in the 20s, I'm gonna guess, to get farms powered
Oh,
up
yeah.
so they could have a light. And yet, it has adapted over the years to give me a gruesome process of filling out forms to get some money for my panels. But the point is, it did move along with the time.
Yeah.
And that's USDA.
Yeah.
So that should be a
Yes.
sign
So-
of something.
So who were you working with anyone at the federal level as you were proceeding through that?
I think everybody I was mailing things to was actually in Presque Isle. There's
Oh,
an
okay.
USDA office up there.
Interesting. So,
And we finally got some money after a
So
lot of
we are
things.
running
So
out of time. When do
Okay,
you have to
so-
leave?
I'm gonna leave about a little after 9.
Okay, I have to leave by 9:15.
so that was all I had.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff going on that isn't very close, but
I think we should negotiate. Yeah, we don't have any leverage, my last word. But it does seem like it's numbers you can negotiate,
yeah.
except we don't have any stick over their head.
Outstanding. Okay, so here's the thing about this. I'd like to get an update, just if you have anything on the solar field, if there's anything to say. And we have the TIF thing.
Yeah.
Julie's not here, she's probably at another meeting, so we can get the status of the LED lights later on. But I'm wondering strategically about the TIF thing, would you do an intro, have us study this and come back
Yeah,
with
I just want to
questions?
give a,
Okay.
5-minute overview.
Okay, good. Okay, Seth, would you?
So the good news is, if you follow the link, I think I provided for everybody a couple of times now, we're producing prodigious amounts of power. We produced 18 megawatts in the last about 30 days across the 2 months since it went on, across March and April. They turned it on in late March. It's producing it at a maximum rate of about 800K a day. When this, a day like this, well, no, a day like this will be more like 600. I've just, I've been a little bit out of the loop, so I apologize. I just had back surgery and I'm back. But for a month or two, I really wasn't able to do much and I missed a bunch of meetings. But I've been back in touch with a number of things I started back in January, one of which is getting better granularity data from Solar Edge, which is the cloud-based server for, data server for all of the aggregation of all of the solar stuff that happens, whether who uses Solar Edge inverters, which is the majority of inverters. So Revision, everybody uses the same software and company. They're a huge data repository, and we have client access to it. We just have to set it up. It's taken a little while because Sundog has never done this. You notice we have a display out here on the wall. I'm hoping we can convince the select board, through the select board, to move it to where they promised to move it, which is right here, where the LCI display is, so that when people are sitting there waiting in line, they're looking at it. You just walk right now, and you can see it. And in fact, it has a problem going to sleep. It goes to sleep and it's black. And so there needs to be a little bit of tweaking. I'm back. I'll make sure.
I have that same problem, Sam.
It goes to sleep at 11 in the morning. Anyway, I'm working a little bit with Steve Nolan. There's interesting, because of the complexity with the Sylvania site, it looks like a solar farm might be the way to do it. We still have this limit because LD 1444 failed again, unfortunately. You know, so we're a year behind again. We can only have 9 members. But the possibility is if we can find a solution to the transmission and distribution problem with net metering as the current rule states, and just as a tiny brief recap, if you have a demand charge on your electric bill, which this building does once a year, and it kills our ability to apply net metering credits to the demand charge. It's illegal according to PUC. You can't, so half of your electric bill you can't pay with net metering. It sounds a little crazy, it's an old rule, but it'll change, but it won't change this year. It almost changed, but it didn't. The school, of course, has demand charges on the high school and the middle school. They're huge. Miller, right on the edge, like this building. There are lots of efficiency things that we've been talking with Julie about for a while, but they haven't really been moving very much. I hope to sort of get those going. For example, we've been talking about the lighting and the heating in this building for 3 years now. That would immediately solve the demand charge. It would go away in this building. Boop, bang. It just needs a little initiative. I do not believe she got it into the budget this year. I was out doing surgery when they were doing the budget, so I don't know. I didn't see. I was hoping she could tell us. But we'll find that out. The same applies with the school. If we can do some major conversion and perhaps get a little grant money to do it for LED lighting conversion. They've done these Siemens heating conversions, and it's been extremely successful. Siemens is all over this region doing energy efficiency stuff, saving lots of money. But they haven't done power, electrical power, which is a huge problem. Anyway, that's about it. Since I was out, we did not do the Miller School Intro to Solar that we were going to do, but I hope to do that now that the spring weather is a little bit better. And with any luck, we'll have some more data. I would also like to engage with the high school, the middle school, and the Miller School on doing a little curricular development with their STEM team, such that with the finer granularity real-time data and a camera looking up from the solar array, a little Raspberry Pi camera looking at the sky, you can actually see in real time a cloud drift over the array and cut off one or two of the inverters.
See that?
And the numbers are just
I
amazing.
can watch that on my own.
Yes, exactly. And for
By
schools,
drops.
this is science projects, you know.
Yeah.
We just, it's wicked. It's cool. I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks. Okay, so shall we move to,
Yes, yeah.
That's something.
This is reading material to go through on that. It's pretty dry, but run through it. I'll give you TIF 101 in a nutshell on that. A TIF stands for tax increment financing. What it does, and this is the real simple, is that it takes you define a district, so physical properties on the ground. Has to be, for the TIF to work, it should be commercial or economic development areas, commercial buildings or areas that are zoned for economic development. What you do is that if there's the existing value of that raw land or buildings is calculated. All right, so let's say we have a TIF district of a certain area, and there's 3 buildings, and the existing valuation is, say, $1 million, all right? So what the TIF district does is that you create it and put those 3 buildings in, is that it will capture the new value that occurs. So say we have $1 million, so each of those 3 buildings over the course of, say, 5 years expand, and they add another $2 million to the total valuation. So now the total valuation, 1 million prior and plus the 2 million, is 3 million. What the TIF district does is that it takes the $2 million, they pay their property taxes, and instead of that property tax money going into the general fund, all right, the $1 million will go into the general fund. The $2 million goes into a separate account. It would be a TIF account, all right? Now, that money, it's still property tax money. That money, not going into the general fund where it's used for everyday expenses, the tax money from the 2 million goes into the TIF fund, and that's used for projects that we identify in our TIF plan. So, and that could be,
Make sure I'm following you.
Yeah.
So what's the sequencing? Are you using the future improvement in the value, in the valuation before you have it?
well, let's take a step. Yes, you can do that. That's a nuance. Let's do the basics
called
first on
gambling,
that.
isn't it?
Yeah. No, let's do the basics first. When you do the TIF plan, you identify projects that you want to do. And they have to be, statute says there's certain things that you could do. Bottom line is they have to have an economic development component. They can't be used for, public buildings or anything like that. So it can be infrastructure, sewer, water, broadband, as long as it serves an economic development.
commercial venture.
Commercial thing, all right. It could all, let's
Private
keep it
sector.
really simple on that.
Private sector.
Private, yeah. It could also be used, it could be used for a trail system. If you can make a connection that the trail system is enhancing tourism and connects to regional. So there's a couple of creative things. But you have to pre-identify in your work plan. So if we're gonna say we're gonna use this TIF to expand SER, we have to say where we're gonna do it and what the eventual cost will be, all right, for all the projects on that there. So we're gonna get a little deeper in the explanation, because when we identify the project and the cost, we have to make a relationship between, we'll total all those project costs to the money that we anticipate capturing from the TIF over a period of 30 years. So it has to, our project costs at the very least have to at least equal to or exceed what we're gonna capture. If we have, if we say over 30 years, we're gonna capture $20 million, but our projects only come to 10, the state's gonna say, no. You know, you're gonna have to shrink your TIF district, because the whole purpose is obviously making use of this money towards, because what they can do is say, now, if you don't use that money, it goes back into the general fund.
But you are getting the money before you have the,
No, you're not getting the money before. You're gonna get that money put into the TIF fund only when somebody makes an improvement to that property.
okay.
It has to be
So-
completed, the improvement?
Yeah, well, yeah, you actually have to, the town actually
That's
has
the
to
way
get
they did it
the,
in Rockland.
yeah, actually have to get the physical
So-
tax money.
So the private entity,
Yeah.
the commercial endeavor,
Yeah.
is fronting the money to then get it back later in tax benefits?
No, they don't get, no, let's take a step,
don't
we're gonna,
understand this either.
you're gonna nuance this for, in a little
To
bit.
death, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right, we only put money in the TIF fund when we get it from property tax from new improvements.
So there's no grant coming in, it's just
No, no, no.
exclusive source
That's
tax
right.
income.
That's right. It basically, in a nutshell, we're dealing with property tax money, but instead of it going to the general fund,
You could
it goes
allocate.
into, and it's targeted to our economic development. Now, here, let's get into a little more nuance at this point. Let's say we know a company's gonna build. They got their permits, we know they're gonna build, all right? And we know the value of the new valuation, say it's $20 million, and it's gonna be completed in a year. What the town can do is it can bond improvements in anticipation of that new tax money. Now, the town does take a risk, because, you know, you have to, you know, you're gonna pull out a bond, you're responsible for that payment, and you're anticipating that you're gonna get the tax money to pay it off over a period of X amount of years. So the connection to the business is they, but for the improvements that you're gonna put in, say, sewer, water, broadband, they wouldn't develop there, but because you're gonna do, you know, there's this TIF district and this relationship, you bond ahead of time, you put them in, they build their building, they pay their property tax, goes into your TIF fund, and then you use those proceeds to pay for the.
So it's basically a
bond.
revenue bond, in a complete sense?
It's a
Well,
little different.
it's similar to it. That's a use of the TIF fund.
But the gamble or the assumption is that the entity will succeed and be paying those taxes in the future.
Right.
And the town loses if they don't.
If they don't, yeah.
So that's
Now,
the gamble.
So-
But that's only one use of it.
Right.
That's like a bonding beforehand. What towns typically do is they take that money, the TIF fund grows, and when it gets to a point where they have ample funds, then they do a project.
Okay, so you do it in,
You can do it beforehand in anticipation, or
with
you
other,
can wait till
other
that
people's
project.
tax
yeah.
revenues, right?
And this is, good,
So George and I want to build a $200,000 industrial
Right.
plant on a piece of his land.
right.
We anticipate, well, the town can anticipate however many thousand of income from
Right.
that. So the TIF program typically, is used, just description, would just take our tax money and put it in a pot.
Right.
Not all of it.
Different.
Well, no, well, yeah, just the new value, but in this
New
case, if
value.
it's new, it would all
Yeah.
go. The tax
For
money.
For that
Participated.
new project, that new
Right.
real asset, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then that would just sit there year after year and grow. We would be doing our thing.
Yeah,
Yep,
And then eventually we could say to the town, we really need better sewer. Or the town could decide we should run sewer up to the Waldeboro Business Park.
well, actually, what, we have to pre-identify these things
Right,
in the
ahead of
work
time.
plan. Now, you can amend a TIF, like in a situation where we never conceived of a fact that this was a need, you can amend your TIF to add something to the work plan. But this is, the reason I'm kind of pointing this out is this is forward-looking. This is something like when we say about, you know, investing in the future, creating matches. A lot of towns use their TIF funds to match EDA projects. So, you know, what we're saying is we're gonna identify development areas that we have an anticipation to grow. We're gonna capture the new value, put it in the TIF fund, and then use those funds for projects going forward. So we're thinking in the future here,
So,
all right? So the TIF fund will grow in relationship to how much actual development occurs
In the areas
So-
we
in the
target.
area.
so would an example be, let's say, we'll go with Seth's example of you, George, building something at the industrial park. Could that fund then be used to say, and then the long term, we'll do a little housing development nearby the industrial park?
No, it has
Or
to
sewer
be,
expansion to lead to that?
no, it has to be used solely for economic development purposes.
You
So
mentioned
it
the
can't be
housing
used,
too, though.
well, that's a separate, I don't want to get right now, we're just.
Is there ever a rearward-looking approach where the money that for example, the Waldeboro Business Park has put into the jar for the past 2 years?
Yeah.
There's a fraction of it that stays in a separate jar because it's
It's
only
all dependent
forward-looking.
on the work plan.
It's all forward-looking with work plans.
Now, if we put your development in the TIF district, we obviously would want to put in our work plan things that would benefit the park. So that's the way, looking forward, we would say, so if somebody builds there, we're anticipating, George says, we need power or broadband to it, we'll put that in the work plan to add to.
So we create an asset, in a sense, we're trying to, if we're thinking about attracting businesses that create jobs, that grow us economically, we can identify projects that create assets that will
Absolutely.
definitely build on that.
Yeah.
I'm trying, oh, sorry. I'm just trying to wrap my head around a concrete example. So the work plan would be like, we're gonna move the entrance of the business park off Route 1 because we think we're going to have more traffic and make this more attractive to businesses, and then we're gonna capture the money?
Excellent, excellent.
Okay, so that would
And
be a good
Could
one.
be sewer expansion, could be broadband. And now you can use your work plan can be targeted in two different ways. One, it could be targeted towards, the actual TIF district, so money goes back into the development part. Or it could be for a community-wide project. So we can say, all right, even though we will fund broadband expansion, high-speed fiber, if it serves economic development anywhere in the community, and we'll put that in the work plan. Or we could say, we will, support any new aquaculture business that goes into Waldeboro, to help blah, blah, do whatever. Anywhere in Waldeboro, as long as it meets this criteria. So we can spend the TIF funds both in the area that generates it or outside of it, as long as it's economic.
So let me
Inside the town line.
Oh, yeah, it has to be
Yeah,
within.
inside the town.
So if I can expand a little bit, I think I'm starting to understand. So George wants to do something on his property.
Yeah,
I want to do something at the Brooder.
right.
Whatever. But we all know that we want to do something at Dutch Neck for
Right.
marine development.
Right.
Our funds can be designated into the TIF fund, part of our tax stream, non-geographically contiguously applied
Yeah.
to sewer expansion running east.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that was the piece.
Yeah,
It
that-
doesn't
that-
need to be a development park.
No.
It typically is,
no,
right?
It could
That's
be.
the old,
Yeah.
that's the
old
old-fashioned
model.
way, yep.
That's what I was thinking.
That's
But it
the
could
old
be-
model.
It all depends on how you put it, it has to be put in the work plan ahead of time.
Right.
Okay.
All right, and you could, again, it could be community-wide, you have to you have to be pretty specific and
Yeah.
attach a number to it, let's say in your example, you could say, the work plan says that aquaculture projects within the, town of Waldeboro, including purchase of land, water access easement, you can spell out some things, and you guesstimate, what you're gonna put in that amount.
Because it's tied to jobs or
That's
what,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah, well, they all have to be, their statutes will say, tells us exactly what we can and can't put. We can't build fire stations, or, for now, let's just separate, not consider housing, but, it can't be used for housing, and it can't, it has to be used solely for economic development.
So what if Bob decides in his wisdom that he wants to build a housing development as an economic development activity for himself and his corporation on the east side of Route 1?
No, no housing, no, it's just the
No,
statute
no, not talking about
precludes
housing,
that.
but he has to have sewer to get it. So he's gonna do his housing project.
No, you
That's
can't.
too loose.
Yeah.
Too,
No, no,
it's not
But how do you
connected.
justify, can you only justify that sewer expansion if you're gonna put warehousing, manufacturing, and stores on it?
Yeah.
The
That's the
TIF
only
money-
way?
Yeah, the TIF is only used for, the
Commercial.
economic development. It's
I'll
not
tell you-
used for housing.
But building community is economic
I
development.
know,
We all
but
know
Yeah,
that.
the
you
statute
can't, you
doesn't.
can't get around the
Killing
fence.
questions.
Hey, you know what they do in Japan when they build a big facility to manufacture something,
They build
they need
housing.
lots of hands.
Yeah.
They put housing
Oh, I know.
apartments right on the property
I
with
remember
the,
the story of
with the
them.
factories.
Let's,
Workers jumping
again,
out the windows because they were
this is
losing
one
their
piece of a
minds.
puzzle we're dealing with, the economic development. We're gonna have to discuss the housing and affordable housing on a separate.
Yeah.
Because in the TIF, it's
Yeah.
just not, I don't wanna
Structurally, it's
talk
not
about the
there,
housing TIFs right now, because that's a level of.
There are such things.
There is such a thing, but it's a different animal, and let's save that for another day, because that adds a whole other layer.
So what you've described though, Bill, is it sounds a lot like what I remember hearing happened in Rockland.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly, I mean, the model I've heard before.
Yeah.
It took place in Rockland.
Yeah.
And what was the person from Rockland came here and made a presentation on that
I
at
don't
the
remember.
earlier
John,
economic development meeting.
yeah.
So what's their takeaway as we brainstorm and think about this for the next month or two?
What
How do
does
we
it-
think about this as the town? What is your conception of how it might work?
7%, right?
What?
The amount of land we can do is limited to 7%?
5% of the
5%.
total, yeah. Well, let's not, there are limitations in the total valuation that we can capture, and also the land area, but let's not, we don't need to deal with that.
We gotta read this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the benefit for the town? Again, we're not, if you're gonna look for the benefit today, you're not gonna get it. This is a benefit that we're looking for tomorrow, and in particular, the TIFs are set for 30 years, so we're looking for that forward-looking 30-year period. But let's go backwards. If we had a TIF in place on Route 1, we would have a fair chunk of money to do high-speed fiber,
Yeah,
sure internet, because Hannaford and the TIF district included Hannaford, the Family Dollar,
Right.
Tucker Chevrolet, all those improvements we
That-
would have
that we got,
captured.
we would have
The,
captured.
storage building, we would have gotten that new value that would have gone into the TIF fund, and that would have given us latitude for,
So you can set up, if you anticipate, if you hope for commercial growth, you can define a region, a physical space
Yeah.
that you're monitoring the growth, the value increase.
yeah, you have to get the money from somewhere, so
That's
you
what
have to
this is what I've
identify.
been struggling with, is
Yeah.
what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It sounds like what comes first is defining an area,
Yeah.
watching it increase in value,
Capturing
monetizing that change, and then giving it to somebody else.
What I would suggest is.
Giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, no, well, what we're saying is that the benefit is, some of it's gonna go back into the district where the money comes from. And it could stay there. The work plan
But it
could
doesn't
just be.
have to.
No, the work plan could just be focused on that. Or if there's community-wide things that benefit everybody.
Yeah.
The economic development, then we include it. And that's our choice. how we-
Hannaford's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
So if we had been smarter, we would have monitored, we would have been tracking its increase in tax
Yeah.
revenue.
Well, we would have created the TIF district to
Yeah, that's it,
include
yeah.
it.
Years ago.
What probably we should do is the next task is bring a map and start saying, all right, let's color in tentative areas that we want to include and where we think development will occur. And then we'll take that map and kind of, do some study and say, all right, what's the, the map will be the possibility, and then we'll do the study to make the probability
So
of
if-
where the best areas are.
This may be getting clear to me. So if we had the foresight 15 years ago to define the industrial areas around Winslow's Mills as a TIF area, we could have been accumulating, I guess I'd say, an income differential all these years as my taxes have gone up.
Yeah.
And it could be used to do anything in town that supports the overall economic growth.
Including
Including, maybe in there, but maybe not.
Yeah, but it would be like,
Depending on what we
we could say,
establish.
if you wanted to use it for a project that's in the work plan that, that benefits you.
Right,
yeah,
but
'cause that
if you
further-
declare the area,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not in any way, if I were to come in here flogging the idea of creating a TIF zone around the Waldeboro Business Park, it isn't necessarily gonna help me, but it could help economic development in the town. In other words, it's not as self-serving as it sounds.
No.
It should do both.
Right,
It should do both, yeah.
Yeah.
And ideally, that's what you want.
We get, well, I mean, there was quite a bit of a reaction at the very idea that we would be focusing on getting sewers to the business park because, well, that's
Well,
just a
here-
business, why should we help them?
but here's the thing, the more businesses that we're able to attract into Waldeboro, the more property tax and
Yep.
sewer and water they pay to defray the costs to the residential property. And by losing all of that commercial property that we lost over the last 15 years, and all those jobs, well, good-paying jobs, the money, the cost of that went right onto the residential property owners. Somebody had to pay that.
Let me add just one other thing that's a benefit to the town. And that is, let's use that example, we have that $20 million that we gained, all right? And we're taking that tax money, the town's taking that tax money, because it's new, and putting it into the TIF fund. Now, we report to the state every year our total valuation. We would not report that $20 million in valuation. Well, we report it, but they put it in another column, all right? So that when the school district assigns how much we pay, we don't, that $20 million is not in the mix. So we have a saving. When the county determines how much the town of Waldeboro pays, that extra $20 million of valuation is not in. So there's a benefit there that accrues over
The nuances,
the 30
yeah.
years. Now, when we do the TIF, plan, we calculate out what that would, we guess how much that would be over the course. So that's savings, and that money, now actually, it's not in hand, but it is money that you're
It's-
not paying out.
Right, and it's available to spend on the
Something else,
benefit
yeah.
of the town.
Is it,
Now, if
is
we
there
were
any,
smart, what we would say is we will take that captured value that we're not paying out over the 30 years and put it into a fund to address affordable housing. If we were smart,
hypothetically,
or any other kind of, or take it and say, we'll use it for whatever else we want to do. Because we're saving that, just like energy savings. Or we can take it and say, all right, we have extra money, or we can say, let's reinvest that money into something
Right.
else.
Right.
The more energy, I'm sorry, Seth.
No, that helps a lot. I was gonna ask the unpleasant but necessary question, I think, of the potential political antipathy of the town saying, we're actually taking this money from general revenue, it looks like tax money. It's tax money like every
Yeah,
other dollar.
absolutely.
And we're saying, oh, but we're gonna take this piece and not spend it on schools and streets and blah, blah.
No, we
And I think the perception, if not real, exists. I would argue maybe it is real, but not that it's bad. It's a decision the town must make in terms of investing in the future. But might the public perception be, meaning the selectmen, if they try to sell it to the voters, the pushback is going to be, you want this special business money put aside for the benefit of the business people. And you can say, well, it's coming out of the growth of their businesses, it's their taxes they're paying, your taxes aren't going up, yours might be going down. But the perception is favoritism.
So,
And I know that
Picking winners.
areas have struggled and lost over this. So we
But
need
it
to
can
think
it
about
be defended by saying, this money isn't available this money is only available to be channeled that way, so why not do it, right?
You're right. This is something that, we couldn't put an application until next year anyway.
Right.
We're gonna need time to
Educate the
explain this, but the thing is that the key is that the work plan you put in is
Communications
our
plan.
community work plan. It's our economic plan.
If-
So if we can say, if all the people say, all right, yeah, I'm gonna benefit collectively from it, that help will mitigate some of that. But you're absolutely
That's a
right.
steep hill.
Yeah.
here's my question, I'm gonna put this into a real hypothetical.
Yeah.
If the business park is able to attract someone to build a quite expensive building, and if we set up a TIF district before that happens, then that effectively is the beginning of an accumulation of an increased tax base. But if you don't do it till after it's built, you
Can't
toss
do
it
it.
to the.
you missed it.
Yeah,
So is there any downside to defining an area with its then current tax value, and just saying, okay, that's someday gonna be money in the bank. Because-
No, the existing value goes from, say the date say the TIF starts tomorrow. Then the new value that occurs after tomorrow counts to put into the TIF fund. Everything else before that goes in the general fund.
Right, so if I thought there was a building worth $1 quadrillion
Yeah.
going into the field across the street, and we defined, this is completely, I'm just completely
Yeah,
joking
yeah.
now, but, everybody, if you could define that as a TIF district, just by drawing a circle on a map, and then building started to happen, then that the change in the valuation for that, what's inside that circle,
Goes into the.
becomes a future asset to do something with.
Can I extend that one piece? Just so I have my little industrial park up on Depot Street, but it's not very near his. And it's separated by a large rural suburban area.
They could be islands.
There can be islands.
They can.
So we
could-
could aggregate islands, Dutch
Yeah.
Neck, Depot
Yeah.
Street.
We could define where, these are the
Because that makes
areas
it
we're
much
gonna
more
put in
sensible
the.
to start now, like
And there's
next
no
week.
downside that I can see, other than you've used ink on a map?
That's all. Well, you have to put the work plan together.
And
It
the
has to
plan-
make sense in
And-
terms of
Of what you likely will be doing, or what you're
Absolutely.
committing to do?
what you're likely to be doing with the TIF funds. You have to define. Now, you can amend that plan as you go on. Let's say there's a project we never conceived of. We can amend the plan and include that in the work plan. We can amend the boundaries of the district, something that land that we thought was gonna be industrial, somebody's now gonna put a housing development on it. Yeah, so we could take it out of the
We
district.
should,
and put something else.
I've gotta go, you've gotta go.
Yeah.
I need to,
Yep.
we're gonna need to talk some more on this,
Yeah.
because there's some concrete things that, you said concrete.
Oh, yeah.
There's some concrete and steel things that are on the horizon.
Yeah, oh,
It would
yeah.
be foolish to not have them in the
Absolutely.
before number.
How long does it take to do this? If we decide as a town, next
You have
month,
to vote on it.
we've got to do this. Well, but
It's a year. It's gonna
one
take
year from now, so we
Yeah.
missed a year.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna need, your point about the political will and whatever, we're gonna need that time for us internally here to all come together.
Yep.
Understanding it and being supportive of it, communicating it to the select board, and to the people. I mean, it's gonna take, it's
So
not
we
gonna
should have
happen
started
overnight.
last year.
The good news is that it takes a year to get permitting for anything.
Right. So, I'm sorry, I have to go, I've gotta be an appointment.
Read that, we'll bring the map the next time and
Yep.
start it.
Should there be a smaller working group to try to